There is a particular kind of financial opportunity that exists only for a specific window of time. And most people inside that window do not realize they are in it until they are already on the other side. The window is the working years after 50. And the opportunity is one that the financial industry does not discuss with anything close to the clarity it deserves. Because the industry benefits more from selling products than from helping people understand the specific and powerful position that working after 50 actually creates. My name is Richard Harlow, and I want to talk to you today not about retirement, not yet, but about what is possible for someone who is over 50, still earning an income, and willing to use the next 10 or 15 years with more intention than they have used the decades that came before. Because here is what most people do not understand about working after 50. They see it as the tail end of something, the final stretch before the real chapter begins. They are counting down to retirement rather than building toward it with the full force of the position they are actually in. And that orientation, the countdown rather than the build, is the single most expensive financial mistake I see people in their 50s make. Not because retirement is not worth looking forward to, but because the years between 50 and 65 are, when used well, the most financially productive years most people will ever have. Not the most lucrative. Many people earn more in their 40s. But the most financially productive, in the specific sense that the decisions made during these years have more leverage on the long-term outcome than decisions made at any other time. Let me explain what I mean by leverage. When you are 30, financial decisions have 35 years to compound before retirement. That sounds like a lot, but 35 years of compounding on the modest amounts most 30-year-olds are able to save, against the backdrop of mortgages, child-rearing costs, career volatility, and all the other financial realities of early adult life, produces something. When you are 52, financial decisions have 13 years to compound before 65. 13 years sounds like less, but 13 years of compounding on larger amounts made possible by a career that has reached its peak earning years, by children who are becoming financially independent, by mortgages that are further along, by a life that has simplified somewhat from its most expensive phase, can produce something that surprises people with its size. The leverage comes not from the time alone. It comes from the combination of time and capacity. And after 50, the capacity to direct meaningful amounts of money toward wealth building is, for most people, higher than it has ever been. The question is whether that capacity is being deployed, actively, intentionally, with a clear picture of what it is supposed to accomplish, or whether it is being absorbed into a lifestyle that has expanded to consume whatever the career years have produced. I knew a man named Desmond. He was 54 years old, a regional manager for a manufacturing company, earning a solid income that had grown consistently through his career. Desmond was comfortable, not wealthy by any stretch, but comfortable. A good home, a reliable car, vacations that were pleasant rather than extravagant. He came to me not because anything was wrong, but because something had crystallized for him on a drive home from work one afternoon. He had realized, with sudden and somewhat uncomfortable clarity, that he had been living at the level his income permitted for 25 years, without ever asking whether that was the right way to use what he was earning. He had been consuming his capacity rather than deploying it. When we looked at the specifics of Desmond's situation, what we found was not a story of irresponsibility. It was a story of inattention, of a financial life that had been running on autopilot for decades, absorbing income at roughly the rate it arrived, and producing a savings position that, while not alarming, was significantly below what his income history should have generated. The capacity had always been there. The deployment had not. What we built together over the next 18 months was not complicated. It was a deliberate reorientation of how Desmond's income moved through his life. Not a dramatic reduction in his quality of life, but a systematic shift in the proportion of his income that was working versus the proportion that was simply living. He increased his retirement account contributions to the maximum allowed. including the catch-up contributions available specifically to people over 50 that most people in his position were not using. He identified 3 ongoing expenses that had persisted through inertia rather than genuine choice, and redirected the combined amount into a low-cost index fund that required no ongoing attention. And he did something that most people in his position never think to do, which is to treat his mortgage as an accelerated project rather than a 30-year default. The result at the end of 5 years was not spectacular in the way that financial success stories are usually told. There was no single brilliant move, no market timing that paid off, no investment discovery that changed everything. What there was, at the end of 5 years, was a financial position that Desmond had never expected to reach. Not because anything extraordinary had happened, because something ordinary had happened consistently. The capacity that had always been there had finally been deployed rather than consumed. The passive income dimension of what we built together is the part I want to address directly, because it is the part that most people over 50 think about, but rarely act on with sufficient specificity. Passive income is not a category of financial products. It is a characteristic that certain financial structures produce over time. The dividend payments from an equity portfolio that has reached a certain scale. The rental income from a property whose mortgage has been sufficiently paid down. The interest from fixed income instruments held within a structure designed to generate rather than merely grow. None of these appear overnight. All of them require a period of building before the generating phase begins. And the critical insight for someone who is over 50 and still working is that the working years are the building phase. The income earned from labor is the raw material from which the income earned from assets is eventually constructed. Every dollar directed toward an income-producing asset during the working years is a dollar that will eventually work on your behalf after the working years end. This is the orientation I wish more people over 50 adopted when they thought about their remaining working years. Not a countdown, a construction project, a deliberate, specific, ongoing effort to convert a portion of labor income into asset income, to build, year by year, a financial structure whose output does not require showing up anywhere. The scale does not need to be grand to be meaningful. A dividend portfolio that generates a few $100s per month. A paid-down property that generates rental income above its carrying costs. A fixed income position that produces a predictable stream. Each of these, individually, is modest. Together, and combined with whatever pension or Social Security income exists, they constitute a financial foundation whose solidity has nothing to do with the continued willingness of any employer to keep writing a paycheck. What Desmond understood, by the end of our work together, is something I want to leave with you directly. The working years after 50 are not a postscript to the financial chapter of your life. They are the final opportunity to write the most important parts of it. Every year that passes in the countdown orientation, waiting for retirement rather than building toward it, is a year in which the building phase is running without a construction project. The capacity exists. The time exists. The question is only whether the intention exists to use them both. This week, not when things settle down, not when the timing feels better, I want you to calculate one specific number. Take your current monthly income and subtract your actual monthly expenses, not the estimated ones, the real ones tracked against actual bank and credit card statements. What remains is your current monthly deployment capacity. That number, directed consistently toward income-producing assets for the next 10 years, is what will determine the shape of your financial life after the paycheck stops. If you have never calculated it precisely before, today is the right day. What you find will either confirm that you are already building well, or it will show you the gap between what is possible and what is currently happening. Both outcomes are valuable. Only one of them is comfortable.